Welcome to Boondog. This is Bryce, just giving you a new video with Backlash predictions coming up with this weekend. Without further ado, we'll dive right into that. But before we do, there has been some talk and chatter with a lot of the fans of wrestling that there is some concern, like we did with WrestleMania, where a lot of the matches did end up being very short and only received those 7 matches per night. And then matches typically revolved around a little bit more than 10 minutes apiece. So kind of want to quickly address that. Do I feel like with a 5 match card and a segment in there, especially a Backlash pay per view known for not necessarily being the most excessively extravagant. Wow, excuse me. Pay per view out there. That kind of comes into question. Is that something we're going to see? Ultimately, I do think this will give light if that was more a WrestleMania thing with the ads taking up a lot of the match time, but knowing how TKO has been, we can only see from there. I do want to go ahead and start into the card, though. First, we'll dive into Io Sky versus Asuka. I do believe this is one of the most hype matches. You could have seen this on the WrestleMania card. You should have seen this on the WrestleMania card with the story that's being built. But without kind of diving too much into it, I'm going to go ahead and give my vote that Io Sky gets the win here. I think this is not necessarily something that's going to dive into 2 or 3 matches. I think this will be quickly the blow off the feud, especially with Kairi Sane no longer with the company. Kind of brings into the question like a lot of the why behind the feud is kind of going away. And yes, there still is that part that they're building around about the mentorship and everything between Io and Asuka, but ultimately I do want to say this is more likely going to be an Io Sky win, and more likely the feud will conclude here. Next up, we have Seth Rollins versus Braun Breaker. Braun coming back and Seth recently from injuries. I think this match is going to be something to watch. Seth had a great match with Gunther over the weekend at WrestleMania. But Braun, this will be his first real test back from injury. I think that ultimately this is going to be one of those feuds, though, you do get that 2 or 3 matches, and they're probably going to have this go through the summer. This probably will conclude with the 3rd match of SummerSlam, if we're being transparent. I can easily see Braun Breaker getting the first win here, Seth getting the second win for them to have a grudge match at SummerSlam. So I do go with Braun Breaker here. Next up, we have the United States Championship. One of the 2 championship matches on the show is Trick Williams defending against Sami Zayn. I did predict last video that Sami Zayn was going to retain and turn heel. That did not happen. And they went the right call. Trick Williams has been becoming a babyface on SmackDown, and I think this is ultimately something that I'm going to say that more than likely it just, with Backlash being the way it is too, I think it's gonna be played safe. My heart says one thing and my gut tells me another, and not necessarily because I have any ill will towards either Trick or Sammy as far as a heart, but more so what I think should happen versus my gut of what WWE is gonna do. I think that ultimately I'm gonna pick my prediction as my gut feeling. I think Trick retains here. I still would like to see maybe a short heel run with Sammy, him turning heel and regaining the United States title for Trick to recapture at SummerSlam. Um, However, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case here, or something that it has to be either. It doesn't have to be this elaborate and long story about how when you do the double turn. That doesn't have to be something that's necessarily done. It's just a cool idea, though, if it did. We're going to go ahead and dive into there is the Danhausen and the mystery partner versus Kit Wilson and the Miz. I'm going to ultimately go here with Danhausen and the mystery partner. Um, you can go 1 of 3 ways here, right? And I could be wrong here either way. It could be more, but I think the leading 3 candidates are you get um, Elton Prince returning from injury. However, there has been some setbacks with his that I've heard. Again, I have not verified, so don't take that for a fact there. But Elton Prince would be a nice shout there, especially if they don't plan on reuniting Pretty Deadly and they continue to push Kit Wilson in a singles run. I think another one that you could see as a huge possibility is CM Punk. He's been away from Raw for the last couple of weeks, and the last time we saw him was the Raw after Mania, where he had talked to Cody. It was implied that there's going to be a world title match there, so I think that's going to be something to keep an eye out for. Especially, Punk and Danhausen, they're friends outside of the company, and they've been friends when they were in AEW. So for Punk to have his Welcome to SmackDown, um, debut almost or re-debut since he was on SmackDown in his previous run with WWE, I think this is definitely something we can possibly see. But I would say one that a lot of people, surprising to me, are not talking about is Jelly Roll. I think Jelly Roll is a very good candidate here. I know that a lot of people saw that video on social media he made with him and Pat saying that they don't need to be there and that they should step away. However, there was that rumor that Jelly Roll's gonna have that tag team match with Cody and Randy and Pat, and just because Pat's stepping away doesn't mean that Jelly Roll wanted to necessarily step away from having a match, especially having some matches with Kit Wilson on SmackDown beforehand. This does fit in for something where you can make the comedy segment. Like, this doesn't necessarily have to be a wrestler, and I think it's a harmless segment that Jelly Roll really cares about what he's doing, and he does phenomenal in the ring. For a celebrity, I really appreciate and enjoy the time that we have with him there. So yeah, I think that ultimately Jelly Roll is probably my pick to be um, Danhausen's partner, but I could also, like I said, see going with Elder Prince, or CM Punk is more than likely the most probable as far as a safe bet there. I will say this actually, not to dwell too much on it. Someone we have not seen in a very long time, and a little bit of a dark horse pick here, is Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens was last seen on the SmackDown brand, and yes, I know he was a heel at that time, but it's been a long time since we've had Kevin Owens on the roster. That would be kind of a nice way to reintroduce him, is to come back and have that match. I mean, he did have something similar to him happen where he was facing tag team, I believe it was A Town Under, Theory and Waller, and he had a mystery partner, and that Orton came back. So it'd be kind of a nice mirror image if he was to come back and as well. So those are my four predictions. I'm gonna say out of the four, um, that you're more than likely gonna get Jelly Roll. That's probably my biggest of the four. Next up, we do have the John Cena segment. I do think Cena is probably going to play a backstage role with Danhausen early in the show, with Danhausen trying to recruit him. But I do believe this is more likely a WWE ID, or not WWE ID, but it's the Club WWE announcement that he's trying to talk about. He says it's going to be groundbreaking. I think it's more so just kind of laying out more about the program, or maybe there's a change to the program. I would be kind of surprised if he was to say anything more related to the product on TV that we're going to see kind of day to day or week to week in this case. So ultimately, I do think that they're hyping it up more than it's going to be. I'd like to be wrong. I'd be surprised if I was wrong. But again, I'm probably thinking Club WB. That's something that he's been taking up a bigger role of since retirement. So that's probably where I see that going as well. Uh, yeah, and then finally, the final match of the night is Roman Reigns versus Jacob Fatu for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Um, I know there's been a lot of speculation with Roman Reigns dropping all his dates in June. Uh, I understand that piece to the business there. I don't think he's going to be dropping the title. I think he will retain the championship. I'm hoping that he's just renegotiating his dates or whatnot. It's not something where he's saying he's going to be full time and then he's going to take all June off and Night of Champions off, and we don't get that world heavyweight run there. I'm really hoping that in that case he does stay full time through the summer. I understand he has a lot of obligations that he has to take care of outside of the WWE, so 100% understand that piece. But it is nice to have him full time, even if it's not something necessarily where he's competing on Raw, but it'd be cool to see maybe once or twice this summer a 6-man tag with the Usos. Uh, just kind of throw away, you have him come in, do the hot tag, and hit the Superman punch and the spear, and that's it. But it'd be kind of cool to still announce that he was wrestling on TV. So that's a whole nother segment, a whole nother can of worms there. But ultimately, I think Roman Reigns gets the championship retention here. Jacob Fatu is probably going to get even more over than he already is with the fans, and he is over. He is very over. And he's doing excellent work. I think this is something that's going to establish him, even with the loss. It's going to put him over in defeat. And I'm very excited to see what goes from there. I think that possibly Jacob goes back to SmackDown, especially if Punk doesn't come over to SmackDown, and maybe gives him a little bit of buffer that, who knows what's going on with Cody. If Cody's going to eventually hold off and they're going to wait a while with Randy healing up from some injuries from Mania, or maybe Gunther gets the strap, going over to SmackDown temporarily and can hold that, and maybe you could have Jacob feud for it. But ultimately, too, you have to be careful with him because you can't have him lose every single match as well for the world title, because it comes into that issue that we have with LA Knight where we want to see him succeed, but it's very challenging when someone as awesome as he is to his caliber is kind of like another example is Bray Wyatt back in the 2013, 2014. A lot of people will always, say that he lost too much, so it's hard to take him as a credible, competitor. And you just don't want. And again, that's completely light years here. Jacob hasn't even had his first world title match, so speculation and all that can do me all the good there, but might just end up making me look crazy and probably clipped on Twitter and everything. So, needless to say, most importantly, guys, remember to enjoy the show. It's going to be a great time, minus all the odds, and we're going to have a great time. I'd love to talk to y'all. If you have any questions or anything, you can find me on Twitter um, at Bryce Boondog. So find me there. I'd love to chat. Let me know in the comments what your most excited thing about the show is. I'm honestly, for me, it's probably going to be the Roman and Jacob match because, again, I expect really awesome things from Jacob and Roman. They're going to kill it. Same with the rest of the roster. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the show.